It started with a quiet voice in a crowded house and ended with a storm that no press release could contain. If you want to follow every update, every statement, and every new piece of evidence as it unfolds, hit subscribe and turn on the bell now. This story moves fast, and the next detail could change everything. What follows is a careful, human account of what Sylvia, the Lamb family's longtime housekeeper, has told investigators and reporters, how her testimony directly challenges public statements once offered by the family's leadership, and why her decision to come forward has exposed a complex web of loyalty, power, and possible concealment inside one of the most watched Christian networks in America. Sylvia's voice matters because she's not an outsider with an axe to grind. She is someone who lived and worked inside the Lamb household for years. That proximity gives her testimony a different weight. She says she was there the day the family gathered at the beach house for an executive retreat and that she saw, clearly and directly, events that contradict public accounts. According to Sylvia, a family member followed the child up the stairs and was alone in the child's room while the little girl was undressed. That detail matters because it contradicts an early narrative advanced by the leadership which suggested either innocence or misunderstanding. When a household staffer who spent years observing family life describes an interaction with specificity, who was where, what was seen, and the reactions that followed, journalists and investigators take note. It's not the drama of a headline that moves people, it's the mundane clarity of who was in which room that can break open a narrative and force a closer look at earlier denials. Sylvia's account does more than place people in space, it places them in moments that carry moral significance. She remembers details others did not, or could not, deny, that Joshua Brown followed the child after being told to change, that his actions were not a harmless gesture of showing a view or helping, but a decision to be in a private space with a vulnerable child. That sort of specificity makes a public relations argument, that everything was misread, or that a child misremembered, harder to maintain. People who have worked in domestic settings know that staff often notice small behavioral patterns long before families do, who lingers too long, who insists on one-on-one time, whose touch seems overfamiliar. Sylvia's testimony went beyond a single incident. She recounted earlier moments by the pool where Joshua's physical attentions to the child made others uncomfortable. Those memories, offered by someone who faces the people she described every day, altered the conversation from speculation to a pattern that demanded explanation. What took real courage was Sylvia's willingness to risk her livelihood by speaking up. In tight-knit households where employers can determine not just a paycheck but also immigration status, housing, and future referrals, the price of breaking silence can be high. Sylvia says she faced pressure inside the family. Some members encouraged her to tell the truth to authorities, while others made clear, if unspoken, that speaking up could have consequences. That dynamic, the tension between conscience and survival, is common in institutional abuse stories. When the person with the clearest view of day-to-day life steps forward, it forces the broader community to reckon with the human costs of silence. It also reframes the narrative of he said, she said, into a living record of what actually happened inside the house. Her testimony didn't stand alone. She recalled earlier troubling behavior that, in isolation, might have been dismissed as awkward or clumsy. But Sylvia pointed to a pattern, repeated moments of overfamiliar affection that made the child withdraw and adults uneasy. She described a scene by the pool where Joshua kissed the child in a way that struck her as excessive, and she remembered how those moments were followed by a noticeable change in the child's behavior. That sequence, affectionate behavior, withdrawal, silence, is how many survivors' histories begin, and for professionals in child welfare it is a red flag. When someone who knew the child's everyday rhythms confirms those changes, it lends credibility to the family's concerns and heightens the need for an independent, thorough inquiry. Sylvia also challenged the public timeline offered by Joni and others. In public statements, Joni had suggested she was nearby and could have intervened. Sylvia's recollection places Marcus and Joni elsewhere, in the basement, not in immediate proximity to where the alleged incident occurred. If the senior family members were not as close as previously claimed, that undermines the defense that they acted quickly and appropriately. These are not semantic quibbles. Whether a parent or grandparent was in the room next door or 3 floors away changes the assessment of what they could have seen, heard, or done. For people outside the family trying to understand whether institutional procedures were followed, such details matter. Sylvia's willingness to say where the adults were at the time highlights the difference between an account shaped by protective instincts and a chronicle shaped by observable fact. The fallout for Jonathan has been particularly painful and instructive. According to Sylvia and public reporting, Jonathan's insistence that his concerns be taken seriously cost him his future at Daystar. He believed, and Sylvia's testimony supports this, that his refusal to endorse a sanitized account of the event and to sign a non-disclosure agreement contributed to his demotion and eventual firing. The arc, from a leadership track to professional exile, sends a stark message about what happens when internal criticism collides with institutional preservation. Families that double as corporate structures often struggle to separate kinship from governance, and when a son's conscience conflicts with a parent's decisions, the consequences are both emotional and professional. Jonathan's experience is a cautionary tale about the price of standing for perceived truth in the shadow of powerful institutional interests. Sylvia's observations also implicated other family members in the communication dynamic. She reported that Rachel Lamb purportedly misled her parents about the extent of any exoneration concerning Joshua, telling Marcus and Joni that the matter had been cleared when, according to other accounts, it had not. If true, that kind of misdirection within a family-run institution speaks to deeper governance problems, information control, selective disclosure, and a preference for internal reconciliation over transparent investigation. In organizations where family members hold multiple decision-making roles, the risk of partial or inaccurate briefings to senior leaders is real. That dynamic can prevent boards and stakeholders from getting the full picture they need to act responsibly. Perhaps the most troubling implication of Sylvia's testimony was her sense that Joshua might have had some leverage, personal or otherwise, that complicated how senior leadership responded. She suggested that secrets or threats, even if unspoken, created a pressure that influenced the family's early handling of the allegations. When insiders suggest that an alleged perpetrator may hold undue sway, whether through loyalty, financial ties, or other leverage, it raises immediate concerns about the impartiality of any internal review. Institutions that allow any single individual to control or intimidate decision-making expose themselves to failures that can be moral, legal, and reputational. Sylvia's account also underscored how systemic issues within church networks can hinder accountability. Many religious organizations emphasize reconciliation and private restoration. When combined with family control and a lack of independent oversight, the result can be a culture that favors internal resolution over transparent external review. That is not pastoral ignorance. In many ministries, there is a sincere belief that family and community can heal the wounds they cause. But when allegations involve possible criminal conduct or ongoing risk to children, the right next step is a careful, independent inquiry with law enforcement and child protection professionals involved. Sylvia's testimony argued precisely that the family's initial response prioritized preservation over protection, and that choice has cascading consequences for trust and safety. Finally, the institutional fallout has not been limited to internal dynamics. Daystar, which once depended on a global audience's trust and on third-party program partners, now faces both financial pressure and reputational strain. Reports of assets being sold, programming disruptions, and hesitant donor support have been circulating, and such effects are often the practical consequences of prolonged uncertainty. When viewers and partners cannot reconcile the ministry's stated values with the reality of how it handles serious internal allegations, the financial implications are unavoidable. Ministries depend on credibility. When credibility fractures, the resulting operational stress can force hurried asset sales or belt-tightening measures that affect staff, international outreach, and long-term mission plans. The takeaways from Sylvia's testimony are stark and unsettling. Independent corroboration from a household insider dismantled elements of the carefully crafted public defense, showing that narrative control is fragile when daily facts contradict the script. Sylvia's courage shines through in a story where, often, the most vulnerable actors are the least likely to speak. In exposing what she saw, she shifted the debate from denials and press statements to concrete questions about where people were, what they witnessed, and how decisions were made. Her action underscores how truth in institutions often depends on those with the least institutional power being willing to risk everything to tell what they saw. Jonathan and Susie's personal cost paints a human picture of institutional consequence, families can fracture, careers can be ended, and spiritual communities can split when conscience collides with authority. Their exile, if that is what it is, forces the public to ask whether moral courage is punished or protected in the circles that hold religious authority. That question is not merely academic, it determines whether others will come forward if they suspect wrongdoing, or whether silence will continue to be the safer choice for many. The allegations of deception inside Daystar leadership require urgent answers. Who was aware of what, when were concerns escalated to external authorities, and what independent steps were taken to verify or refute claims? These are technical, procedural questions with deep moral weight. The unfolding case makes clear that good intentions are not enough. Institutions need structures that ensure transparency, protect whistleblowers, and prioritize the safety of the vulnerable above institutional reputation. Sylvia's testimony is an uncomfortable but necessary moment of clarity. It exposes how power, secrecy, and loyalty can combine to shroud the truth, and it also shows how one person's bravery can pierce that darkness. The response now must be proportional and accountable, thorough, independent investigation, clear timelines for the release of findings, and structural reforms to ensure that family ties do not override legal and moral obligations. If those steps are taken, they will not erase the trauma of the past, nor will they return broken trust overnight. But they will signal that the institution, however battered, is willing to put protection and truth above preservation. We are watching a story in motion. Investigators, journalists, and community leaders will parse Sylvia's statements alongside other evidence. More witnesses may come forward. Documents may be released. And the community, donors, viewers, staff, and the broader public will watch to see whether the organization chooses transparency or continued closure. For those who care about faith institutions that seek to live by the highest moral standards, Sylvia's testimony is both a wake-up call and an invitation. Wake up to the reality that systems matter, and accept the hard invitation to ensure those systems protect the vulnerable and hold the powerful accountable. If you want updates on this case as it develops, the release of any official reports, statements from the family, and outcomes of any investigations, be sure you're subscribed with notifications turned on. This story touches on deep questions about trust, power, and responsibility. Watching it unfold responsibly means insisting on evidence, protecting victims, and demanding reforms that keep children safe. The courage of a single housekeeper may be what finally makes accountability possible, and that is a responsibility none of us should take lightly.